Okay, we are starting now. Welcome to Future Law Webinars, a series designed to feature thought-provoking discussions with our distinguished speakers, all leading up to the highly anticipated Future Law Conference this May. In today's session, we welcome Valérie Saintot, a lawyer, author, and academic with 30 years of experience in both private and EU public sector. Renowned for her expertise in legal tech and digital transformation, she brings a wealth of knowledge to the table. Well, the legal industry is buzzing with discussions about upskilling. With all the knowledge, capabilities, and advanced technology at our fingertips, why does it still seem so difficult to come together and drive meaningful breakthrough in legal practice?
Good morning, Valentin, and thank you for the introduction and your first question. Indeed, in the 3 or 4 impulses that we have been discussing for sharing in today's webinar, which is obviously not a training, so we will only scratch the surface. We're going to go through a couple of aspects, and we're not going to go in the traditional long list of inventory of possible skills. And if you saw in the title, we put new into parentheses because maybe at the end we are looking backward and saying, is it really a problem of new skill, or is it a problem of better using the biological human technology that our brain, our hearts, and our hands are availing to us human beings? So we're not going to go in all sorts of alphabet-shaped sort of, T-shape, verticality of depth of legal knowledge and horizontality of the transversal skill that we may need. We're going to go from a slightly different angle today. We're going to go from the perspective of what I call cognitive biases, in particular, biases, and we're going to detail each of the 4 that I have selected, that I found regularly over the decades in the legal industry and that I have not seen removed or made conscious in the 21st century. So I just want to kind of go one by one, take the first bias. And the first bias is hierarchy bias. We are from a profession and an ecosystem where academic title and place in the organizational chart oftentimes dictates a bit the pace of the development, the pace of the integration or not of technology, the way we work together, and so on. And I posit that the hierarchy bias, which has many advantages, if it takes over the governance of how we adopt new skills and how we adopt technology, may keeps us a little bit captive of the past. And that's why I see as a first antidote, and for each of the biases, I will avail some antidote as well as some grounded known skills. So the first antidote is, I think, very much changing the way we think from lonely performers or professional behind our screen to a more thinking together and sensing together. And I put sensing both from the perspective of our senses, perception, but also making sense. So trying to shift really the gear and become very comfortable and literate at engineering the collective in a profession that traditionally is very nominative and very individual focused from the perspective of the performers. What does it mean for naming more casually known skills? Facilitation, coaching, integrative leadership, mindfulness, things that brings really what constitute the social textile of intelligence, because we are in a space where we are constantly having conversation with a more dematerialized and disembodied intelligence, that it is AI or that it is digitalized processes, technology. And so instead of trying to spit 1,000 words at the pace of GPT, maybe we take the normal pace of biological intelligence, but then presents other qualities in the conversation. But in order to do that, we need to become a team sport and not just an individual sport as we might have been doing for very long. The second bias that I see very commonly present is what I call the disclaimer bias. And the disclaimer bias is very much the pressure, as we are a regulated profession, very different depending on the continents, but generally regulated profession with high ethical stake and high liabilities, we tend to kind of front load all the things that we do not stand liable for. But by the time you know that we are in the economy of attention almost more than in the economy of knowledge, when we have consumed the attention of our counterpart to explain all that cannot work and what we are not responsible for, there is almost no time and intelligence available to really tackle the problem at stake. And so this disclaimer bias, which is a mental model that helps us manage our risk on a day-to-day basis, if too present, can really deter innovation and the technological breakthrough that we could benefit from in view of all the technology that is available. When we look at what could be an antidote, we need to go much more in being clear how being visionary thinkers and investing empathy do not stand in the way of liability. And so we need to go very, very much deeper, not just, find the new fad and the new tech and the new tool and the new sexy thing, but have an introspection into how do we stand in our own way. And that's what I call really going into looking at things very differently. And concrete skills or legal design thinking, knowledge visualization, futures prototyping. When we serve this menu on a standalone, not going to the root cause, we kind of look as if we are gimmicky. We've heard the word legal design, now design thinking is all over, therefore lawyers needs also legal design thinking. No. It's a much more deep-rooted reason that we can absolutely trace back to very common cognitive biases that are extremely helpful, maybe 50% of the time, but the other 50% of the time stand in our way. And therefore, if we mobilize tools and methods that kind of make us aware of the bias and decide consciously whether we stick with it or whether we depart from it, that's really what I call new skills. It's not that it is new in the sense of thinking is an old thing, but it is new in the sense we mobilize it, we revisit it, and we own it. Third bias is the so-called right answer bias. And the right answer bias is because we have this strong ethics and regulation and the need to kind of help our client make sense in a complex, volatile, and uncertain world, there is a drive to indeed find the right answer. And what does the right answer does? It forces to narrow so much the scope of our agency that we are completely oblivious to the big picture. We are oblivious to ramification, because as soon as we name ramification, we also need to have right answers for those ramifications. So from one defined issue and scope, we end up having a network of issues and scope. And that is not naturally compatible with our psyche and our professional deformation, which again, neither good nor bad. It's a state of affair. And in order to move and break through and outgrow our limitation, we need to become fully aware of those dimensions. And so what are the type of antidote? We need systemic thinking. We need practicing more imagination. Of course, for a syllogistic mind, who needs to have what does the law say? What are the facts about and how we conclude? And all of a sudden, we interject the variable of systemic thinking or imagination. It feels hocus pocus, modern rubbish sort of, new selling market stuff, while it is a necessity in order to perform the law at 3.0, 4.0, or 5.0. That's the journey we are on. And if we do not do the analytical effort, and if we do not capitalize on our extraordinary minds that we have as legal professionals in order to go to root cause and to go to underlying dynamics, we are just a pale version of the full potential that we could express as lawyers. And so the sort of concrete tools we need to really become, if I ask any one of us, what does thinking mean? It's a very difficult question. I've been for 2-3 years doing that relatively systematically with people who are really switched on and who are really educated and very active. Very few can explain what is thinking. What happens in 0-1 term, what happens in quantic term, what happens in the body, what happens in the organ called brain, what happens in the entity called mind, what happens in the context, what happens individually, collectively. We get extremely, very quickly silent, which for our profession is quite of an achievement. And so it's very, very fundamental that we re-own and we redefine and we invest and embody what does it mean to think. We also need to kind of appreciate that creativity is not just, for the arty, lost soul, which I claim to be, but it is really for anyone. It's a process, it's a method, it's something that is about transcending your current limitations so that you open the space to something which is so much more powerful, adequate, interesting. And so these are the sort of thinking that also in view of the last bias, which is so fundamental, it's so positive, the cognitive bias of status quo, because if we want to preserve the rule of law, if we want to preserve democracy, we need stability. We cannot go with the wind. So the wind blows west, the law goes west, the wind blows right, the law goes right, up, down, forth, back, century ago, century forward. So the status quo bias has a validity, use, and merit. The challenge is that it also stands again in the way if practiced without discernment. And so in order to kind of not get trapped in the cognitive bias of status quo, we need an antidote, which is called agility, which is the ability to stick to what you believe is correct or change position if you have enough data points, information, knowledge, or know-how that indicates something else should happen. And typically, you need some, agile skill from project management. You need to be data-driven. You need to be caring for processes and both digitalizing, digitally transforming your processes. It's a very many-layered reality, and it is not just, off the cuff, looking good and feeling sexy type of invitation. It's really about hard work. It's very, very hard work to transform anything, and in particular legal ecosystems. So if we manage to really appreciate the incredible value, the incredible depth, the incredible potential that lies there, then we start to become quite interesting for ourselves, for our client, for society at large. There is really, really a lot we can go there, and that's why I call ease legal, from the legal ease play of words. The legalese where we are oftentimes mocked for being a little bit jargony. I turned every kind of stone on the way into something positive. So instead of being trapped in the legalese world, we could ease legal with a little bit of deep analytics that our natural talents are availing to us.
Well, that's a great information, and I really adore your attitude towards this. We definitely need more in-depth information on how to structure the processes within legal industry, because it's definitely trailing behind in terms of digital transformation. But can you tell us more about this idea of thinking and feeling more?
Yeah, it's not an easy one, and maybe I am not doing a favor to myself. So all I avail today are for feedback, and I'm absolutely happy. I manage more my ignorance than my knowledge. So if I am wrong or falling short in my reasoning, I am definitely happy to hear about it. But this is how I look at it. We have the situation whereby basically machines, they reason. They do not think, they reason. And that is not a detail. They compute, they predict, but they do not think and feel, at least until now. And listening to the biggest thought thinker and practitioner of AI for another reasonable while, if ever. So what really matters is to reinvest that space and to really appreciate. And I'm gonna contrary to the pace of the flow of words that I am able to pull together, I'm just going to pause 10 seconds and ask each and everyone to take a second to read the visual and just ask and make a little hack in your head how many of those category of thinking modes you practice, you would be able to define and you would be able to engineer. Visual one. I have many more in store. I could not fit more on the slide. Visual 2, same process. Have you ever considered how many, a taxonomy of the activity of feeling? How many of those do you know? How many of those do you practice? How many of those can you help others practice? And how many can you engineer? And so the question is, we need a little bit of traveling whereby we need to be much more on the top of our game of what thinking and feeling, and I could add additional perception, but for the sake of the time and for the sake of keeping it together, I limit it to thinking and feeling. But we need to kind of decide how much human are we? How much biological robot versus human agent are we? And if we are not on top of thinking and feeling game, I leave each one of us to answer who we are. What are we? How human are we? And if we do not have a concrete answer to that, do you see the challenge of having a conversation about collective dimension plus augmenting that with the conversation with AI and technology? It gets extremely fluffy, boofy, blurry. We need to find ways of grounding ourselves into the large language model, biological, that we lawyers have the incredible talent with the mastery of vocabulary and rich vocabulary. We need to be much more astute and much more specific at defining for ourselves what it is to be human, alive, and free agent capable of being response able.
Well, that's a great explanation, and I really like the approach of looking through the prism of feeling and thinking. That's how we should perceive our knowledge and the processes we are involved in. But would you be able to give some recommendations on how to design a roadmap to grow the skills and to achieve a success story within digital transformation?
The short answer is no, but the longer answer I will try.
Thank you.
And why I say that? Because we need to, on the a type of thinkings that I particularly explore and research at the moment, spectrum thinking, we need to navigate between the simplicity of a quick recipe and quick fixes, which I will try and guard myself from gliding into, yet understanding the need of pragmatism, and the other end of the spectrum, whereby being too pragmatic, we waste tons of time because we are solution hopping, fad jumping, and we are constantly moving to the next nice little thing heard in a conference versus sticking long enough with what needs to be solved. So I propose a little journey whereby I kind of like propose a 4-step approach for building a roadmap, and I will detail it very briefly each of the 4 steps, and at the end I will give you 2 tools for further consideration. Of course, all what I say is only relevant and valuable if you do 3 things. You agree, disagree, or adjust, so it is for each in their respective ecosystem to look into it. So the first step is define the problem, and I am a big proponent. So many people would tell I am a problem solver, I'm a solution oriented person, and that I take. But I'm solution oriented because I'm very demanding when it comes to defining the problem. And I have that again and again, the situation, people are very uncomfortable with what is less positive, what is painful, or what is negative. We should kind of become much more comfortable and confident with that, because the better we define the problem, the more we will find solution, skills, and we will invest time and effort meaningfully. So take the time to define the problem. It is all but a detail in the big scheme of things. Problem definition is the pre-step, an indispensable step for solution orientation, and not start with solution orientation. Don't go to the aspirin before you understood if you have a headache coming from a hangover, or if you have a headache coming from not having drunk the last 3 hours, or if you have a headache and you have forgotten to drink your cup of coffee. So just be very analytical and very cause and effect oriented. So that's step 1. The step 2 is focus on skills. What knowledge and know-how do we really need to solve the problem? Today, training and learning new skills has become very casual and very advisable, but we should learn with also an performance agenda behind. So we should learn skills that correspond to a problem for which we will have budget and sponsoring, so that in the end, all this, passive or let's say semi-active activity turns into action and impact at small or bigger scale. And we cannot just learn for the beauty of learning. That's okay for Sunday afternoon, but Monday to Friday, it's quite useful to be, goal-oriented when you come to learning skills. And I see so many teams learning so many things which don't stitch together and which don't, in the end, add up. And that afterwards, people who are a little bit more skeptical, who are a little bit more senior, who hold the budget in their hands, say, well, we've spent so much on training and we have not moved 1 inch. But oftentimes we do not connect the learning with the problem we have to solve. And that is yet again an analytical flaw and an analytical gap. There is no magic pill. There is only hard work until further notice. The third perspective is join forces. Really have the ability to see, and I said the sentence once, I repeat it again, I think I could say it for every step, team sport. Look at how the cocktail of talents, either natural one, qualified one from an academic perspective, newly acquired one as a lifelong learning, there is really the need to have a proper map of who can what in order to work with which pieces of which aspects. And the last thing is, I do qualify myself as a big picture person, but then equally as a here and now activist. So you need to understand the big picture. So you think in system, you think analytically, you look at the ramification, at the network of problems and opportunities. And then at some point, you are able to say, why are you taking these 2 square millimeters, or let's make them 2 square centimeters of the big picture, and you're going to act here because you have the belief, a little bit as if you would be practicing traditional Chinese medicine, and that would be an acupuncture point on a meridian. If you press these 2 square centimeters, you're going to have a bigger effect than the effort and the challenge, but you're going to have an effect. And I see far too much time invested in thinking of developing a possible plan for action. And then 18 months later, you're still thinking of developing a possible plan for action. And 3 years later, and so on and so forth. So really think big, analyze, dream big, act small here and now. Better accumulate 10 failures and have a breakthrough as your 11th move, rather than wait for enlightenment of the 11 move, which will never come if you have not done the 10 first. So really think big, act small is, I would say, one more thing that is important. And the sort of tool, so I'm sure it's far too small, you cannot read it, that's okay. We need to gamify and tease you a bit to look for more of our work out there. It's basically a roadmap built on the same concept as the business Canva model, whereby you have some question, and so you can really look at your skill building in perspective. It's not something that is isolated. It's 1/10 of a bigger project that has another 9 components, and upskilling and acquiring new skill is one piece of the 10 pieces that you need in order to have the success story that you were asking for, Valentine. So that's really the thing. The same, looking at law as a business, we can use all the paraphernalia from business acumen, balance scorecard, anything about strategy, making sure that we look at it from a multiple perspective of people, technology, strategy, strength, weaknesses, and so on and so forth, so that we are basically using all the modern tool that exist and that have been trained, prompted, established from other industries, that we can just have to intelligently copy paste and adjust to our industry. So that would be a little bit my question around the success story of what does it take. It's of course much more and much more demanding, but that's how far I could bring the conversation today.
Yes, thank you. If I may, since I used to be a psychologist before
Right?
becoming a lawyer, I'm quite interested in everything about social psychology and cognitive biases. Therefore, would you be able to elaborate a little bit more on how can recognizing those cognitive biases within legal teams actually contribute to the modernization of legal systems and ecosystems?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I hinted slightly at it already. For me, whenever you turn the gaze within, it's as if you move from 2D to 3D. You move from something which is 1 to something where 1 plus 1 can be either 1 or 2. So if I give you €1 and you have €1, you have €2. But if I'm chewing one chewing gum and I take a second one, I still have only one chewing gum. And when you are playing with mental model, cognitive biases, deep social dynamic, you start to have a much more nuanced, a much more refined, and a much more sophisticated map of the territory for yourself. And if on top you do that as a team, you completely change from a 2D map to a topographic map. You start to see where are the mountains, you start to see where are the rivers, you start to see if there is an ocean, a desert, and enriching your picture with social dynamics, deep psychology, not in a term of therapeuticizing, but in a logic of understanding. You have, you know, the law of how you solve conflicts in a merger and acquisition. You have the same law if you need to have a merger and acquisition of the 5 solutions present in the room among 12 people. How do you do the settlement? Well, the first one, you go to commercial and civil code, and the second one, you go to psychology. Why would it be acceptable to use a third-party understanding and knowledge in the law? And why shouldn't we use psychology and social engineering when it comes to being more capable together, individually and collectively? That's for me the perspective. Is just engineering, analyzing, and acting based on data and reliable information. It is not our main expertise, but it is something that is available there. Why not making use of it?
And also anticipating culture, corporate culture within the organization probably also contributes a lot into this topic. Thank you very much. It was truly insightful. I'm asking the audience if there is a question or several questions. Please ask them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask by voice. You are welcome to ask anything. If not, then we just conclude the session.
With my last visual.
Yeah. Okay, while we are waiting, do you have any last insight, say, to leave us with as we come to an end of this webinar?
Yeah, I really think we need to do justice to the incredible mystery, beauty, and potential of being human and alive. And we need to really appreciate that technology, if used, and I'm not having any political conversation, I'm having a very pragmatic insight. If used with a clear intention, could help us solve many of the incredible wicked problem we are facing in today's world. We need to kind of course, empower and entrust those who are working on the risk of technology. But we also need to appreciate that when we point one finger to the AI black box, we point 3 to ourselves. We did not wait for the AI to be power plant of hatred and stupidity. And so I think AI will not solve that. So we'd better get working hard on ourselves so that we are not feeding the algorithm with tones of cognitive biases, when not to say weaknesses, so that we are not hardwiring a future we may not be dreaming of.
Yes, and we have a question from Anita.
Yes, thank you very much.
Please.
It was a fantastic presentation. Thank you, Valerie. Very exciting, very much to process now, actually. I have a question because I just read something and I think it fits very well in what you said about the roadmap and then the 3D thinking. So I read about something about standards and that they serve like a roadmap, and then there is the status quo, which is like drawing the actual landscape. So is this comparable to what you said about 2D, shifting from 2D to 3D?
I do not know in detail what you have in mind, but just the keywords as you drop them and as I connect them to, you know, the meaning I attribute to these semantic, I believe it is going in that direction indeed. It's very much, you know, trying to find, to multiply scenarios, and before you take risk or before you seal a decision or before you commit your responsibility, you have the possibility to contemplate the challenge you are trying to solve from many more perspectives. And that's what I'm trying to promote, not just linearity, but multi-perspective approach to appreciating, analyzing, and prototyping a solution.
Super. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Valerie. And if there is no other question, we will probably commence this webinar to an end. Thank you very much for being with
was
us,
a pleasure.
Valerie. It was a great pleasure, great insights, and we are looking forward to seeing you at Future Law Conference in May.
Me
And
too.
hopefully we will see many other people from the audience as well. And see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.